When I think about a heavy squat or an explosive sprint, I remind myself that the raw power to move a barbell or propel myself forward comes from within, not some mystical place, but from simple molecules stored inside my muscles. My body keeps only a tiny supply of fuel on hand, yet it manages to lift weights, sprint, and jump thanks to a sophisticated system of energy production and recovery. In this talk, I'm going to unpack where that strength actually comes from, starting with the basic energy molecule ATP and exploring the three interconnected systems that resupply it. By the end, you'll understand how these systems work together and how you can fuel them to maximize your performance. Now that we've posed the question, let's define what energy means in biological terms. In the human body, energy is stored and exchanged in the form of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. Each ATP molecule has three phosphate groups attached by high energy bonds. When I need to contract a muscle fiber or transmit a nerve impulse, an enzyme breaks off one phosphate, releasing the stored energy to do work, and leaving behind adenosine diphosphate and a free phosphate. This reaction happens in a fraction of a second, and the used ADP must be quickly reloaded with a new phosphate to make ATP again. Without a continual cycle of breaking and rebuilding those phosphate bonds, everything from lifting a dumbbell to maintaining my heartbeat would grind to a halt. So energy isn't a vague concept, it's an actual molecule being broken down and rebuilt over and over. With this foundation, we can see why a constant supply of ATP is critical for movement. Every repetition I perform, whether it's a squat, a bench press, or a curl, burns through ATP within milliseconds. If I'm running a marathon or cycling for hours, my muscles still rely on ATP being resynthesized continually to keep the fibers contracting. Stored ATP and its partner molecule phosphocreatine serve as a small battery, but without replenishment they're exhausted in seconds. That's why my ability to regenerate ATP is the limiting factor for both strength and endurance. The faster and more efficiently I can convert ATP and phosphate back into ATP, the more weight I can lift and the longer I can sustain activity. Now that we know ATP is our body's energy currency and it gets spent quickly, let's look at the problem of limited supply and how our body addresses it. Your muscles aren't stocked with a huge bank of ATP, they carry only a few seconds worth of this energy currency at any given time. Phosphocreatine, or PCR, acts like a spare battery that helps resynthesize ATP, but that reserve is also tiny. During a max effort lift or an all-out sprint, ATP and PCR are depleted within 5 to 10 seconds. After that, my body has no choice but to flip the switch to slower energy-producing pathways to keep the set going. This limitation is why you can't maintain maximal output for long, and why you start to feel your power drop off during a heavy set. To overcome this, the body uses a system of backup generators. Let's explore those systems and how they keep you moving. To deal with its limited ATP supply, your body relies on three energy systems working in concert. The first is the ATP PC System, which uses stored ATP and phosphocreatine for immediate power. The second is the Glycolytic System, which breaks down carbohydrates without oxygen to generate ATP quickly. The third is the Oxidative System, which uses oxygen to burn carbohydrates and fats in your mitochondria for sustained energy. Rather than switching completely from one to another, all three operate at the same time, with one system taking the lead depending on how intense and how long the effort is. Think of them as an instant battery, a backup generator, and a long-term power plant. Now that we've named the systems, we'll look at how each one dominates at different times. If you map out a timeline of exercise duration, you'll see that the ATPC system dominates for the first 0 to 10 seconds of maximal effort. Between about 10 and 90 seconds, the glycolytic pathway steps up, providing rapid energy but also producing byproducts that cause fatigue. Once you go beyond 2 minutes, the oxidative system takes over, using oxygen to keep ATP flowing for minutes or hours. These ranges are approximate, and all three systems overlap, but this timeline helps you understand which system is working hardest at any given moment. Now let's zoom in on the first and fastest system, the ATPC, or Phosphagen system. The ATPC, or Phosphagen system, is the fastest way my body can make ATP. It doesn't require oxygen and involves just one enzyme, creatine kinase. When I contract a muscle at full force, PCR donates its phosphate to ADP, instantly regenerating ATP. This reaction is so quick that it supports maximal power output with no delay. However, because my muscles store only a small amount of PCR, the system is depleted in about 5 to 10 seconds. That's why a 1 rep max lift or a short sprint is explosive at the start, but can't be sustained. Once PCR runs low, the body shifts towards glycolysis to keep the movement going. Let's look at some examples of activities powered primarily by this system. Think of a single all-out squat attempt, a 60-meter dash, or a football lineman exploding off the line. These efforts last only a few seconds and are driven almost entirely by ATP and phosphocreatine. When I jump to grab a rebound or throw a shot put, the movement is over before I have time to draw a breath, yet it requires peak power. Even the first rep of an Olympic lift or the initial push in a scrum uses this immediate energy. Because these actions are so short and intense, the ATP PC system is the primary contributor. Once the initial burst is over, the body needs to call on other pathways to continue. So how can we enhance this quick energy system? One powerful tool is creatine. Creatine works because it increases the amount of phosphocreatine stored in my muscles by roughly 20 to 40%. With more PCR on board, I can regenerate ATP for a few extra seconds during maximal efforts, leading to higher peak power and better performance in repeated sprints or heavy lifts. A typical loading protocol involves taking about 5 grams 4 times a day for 5 days to saturate my muscles, followed by a maintenance dose of 2 to 5 grams per day. By topping up my PCR reserves, creatine essentially makes my instant battery bigger. Once those reserves are tapped, however, I still need a backup generator. That's where the glycolytic system comes in. The glycolytic system kicks in when my phosphagen stores start to fade. It breaks down glucose or stored glycogen into pyruvate and lactate, producing ATP quickly without the need for oxygen. This pathway bridges the gap between the instant ATP PC system and the slower oxidative pathway. It powers efforts lasting roughly 10 to 90 seconds, like a 400-meter sprint or a 30-second all-out row. While it can generate ATP rapidly, glycolysis also produces hydrogen ions and inorganic phosphate, which lower the pH of my muscle cells and contribute to the burning sensation and fatigue. To see how this plays out in practice, let's look at some activities that rely heavily on glycolysis. A classic glycolytic workout is a set of 10 to 15 reps performed with short rest, where my muscles start to burn toward the end. A 400-meter sprint or a 30 to 60-second all-out row pushes this system to the limit. Battle ropes, sled pushes, and high-intensity circuits also rely on glycolysis. Even CrossFit-style metcons that last under a minute are prime examples. These efforts produce lactate, but as we'll see on the next slide, lactate itself isn't the cause of the burning sensation. The hydrogen ions and inorganic phosphate that accumulate are the real culprits. When my muscles start to burn during a tough set, it's tempting to blame lactate, but lactate is actually a valuable fuel that helps glycolysis continue. The burning sensation comes from hydrogen ions and inorganic phosphate that accumulate as glycolysis ramps up, lowering the pH inside my muscle fibers. This acidic environment interferes with calcium release and cross-bridge cycling, making contraction feel harder. My body has buffering systems such as carnosine that mop up some of these acids and delay fatigue. Understanding this distinction helps me appreciate why certain supplements like beta-alanine can make a difference. Let's explore how boosting carnosine levels can support my performance when glycolysis is humming. Beta-alanine is a non-essential amino acid that combines with histidine in my muscles to form carnosine, a key buffer against hydrogen ions. Supplementing with 2 to 6 grams of beta-alanine per day for 4 to 8 weeks can raise carnosine levels by 20 to 80%. With more carnosine on board, my muscles can neutralize acids more effectively, allowing me to crank out a few more reps before fatigue sets in or sustain a high-intensity effort for a bit longer. Research shows improvements in time to exhaustion and ventilatory threshold. This supplement doesn't work overnight. It's about building up a reservoir. Once glycolysis has carried me through the mid-range, the oxidative system takes over for the long haul. The oxidative or aerobic system is my body's long-term energy supply. It takes place in the mitochondria, where carbohydrates and fats are oxidized through the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. This process requires oxygen and is slower to ramp up, but it can provide ATP for minutes to hours of activity, making it essential for distance running, cycling, or extended sets with light weights. Because it relies on the cardiovascular system to deliver oxygen and nutrients, its capacity depends on my aerobic fitness. Let's look at some activities that rely heavily on the oxidative system. Continuous jogging, rowing, or cycling that lasts longer than 2 minutes taps predominantly into the oxidative system. A 5-kilometer or 10-kilometer race, a steady-state cardio session, or a long hike are powered by this pathway. Even extended weight training sets with more than 20 reps performed at a lighter load rely increasingly on aerobic metabolism as the set drags on. Because oxygen supply is the limiting factor, these activities emphasize cardiovascular endurance. We can influence how well this system performs through our diet and hydration strategies, starting with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are my primary fuel for moderate to high intensity endurance exercise. Glycogen stored in my muscles and liver provides glucose, and as I go longer, ingesting carbohydrates can maintain blood sugar and extend my time to exhaustion. For events lasting 1 to 3 hours, consuming about 30 to 60 grams of mixed carbohydrates per hour helps. In races or efforts exceeding 3 hours, increasing intake to 60 to 90 grams per hour of glucose plus fructose improves absorption and performance because different transporters are used. Getting carbs into my system during the event is as important as carb loading before it. Now, let's talk about staying properly hydrated and maintaining electrolyte balance for endurance. When I sweat, I lose both water and sodium, and if I don't replace them appropriately, my performance suffers. Dehydration increases heart rate and body temperature, while overhydration without enough sodium can lead to hyponatremia, which is equally dangerous. The key is to plan fluid and electrolyte intake based on my sweat rate, the environment, and the duration of my activity. I aim to stay in the middle ground, avoiding severe water loss but not diluting my blood, sodium too much. Practical strategies include weighing myself before and after training to gauge fluid loss and using sports drinks or electrolyte powders during long efforts. With hydration covered, we can appreciate that no energy system works alone. They all overlap. Although we've discussed the three systems separately, in reality they always operate together. At the start of any movement, ATPC provides the immediate surge while glycolysis ramps up. As the effort continues, the oxidative system gradually takes over. Even during an endurance run, small bursts like sprinting up a hill will draw on the phosphagen and glycolytic systems. Likewise, during heavy lifting, oxidative processes still contribute. Understanding that these systems overlap helps me design training that improves all of them and choose strategies to support their function. To see which system dominates various activities, let's take a broad look at system dominance by activity. If I map out different sports and training modalities, I see patterns. A 1-rep max lift or a short sprint is dominated by the ATP PC system. Activities like a 400-meter run, a high-rep set with moderate weight, or a minute-long CrossFit workout rely on glycolysis. Anything lasting more than a couple of minutes, such as a 5-kilometer run or a long cycling session, is powered primarily by oxidative metabolism. However, these labels aren't rigid. A sport like soccer requires repeated sprints and continuous running, drawing on all three systems. Recognizing this dominance helps me tailor my training and recovery. Now let's translate this knowledge into actionable training guidelines. Knowing which system I want to emphasize allows me to structure my workouts. For ATPC development, I keep rep ranges low, 1 to 5 reps, and rest long enough, about 2 to 3 minutes, for my phosphocreatine to recover. To train the glycolytic system, I use sets of 8 to 20 reps or high-intensity intervals lasting up to a minute, with 1 to 2 minutes of rest. To build oxidative capacity, I include longer continuous work or very short rests between efforts. Varying my conditioning ensures I become a well-rounded athlete. Now that you see how to train these systems, let's explore how certain supplements support each pathway. Supplements can give each energy system a boost when used appropriately. Creatine fuels the ATP PC system by increasing phosphocreatine stores, allowing me to sustain maximal power a bit longer. Beta-alanine enhances glycolytic performance by raising carnosine and buffering acids. Carbohydrates feed both glycolytic and oxidative systems. Timing them before and during workouts maintains energy. Electrolytes support nerve function and fluid balance during longer efforts. The key is to dose each supplement appropriately and match it to your training goals rather than taking everything at once. In the next slide, we'll translate this into a practical plan for different athlete types. Let's put it all together. A powerlifter focusing on maximal strength should prioritize low rep sets with long rests and supplement with creatine to maximize ATPC stores. A hybrid athlete who combines strength and conditioning could use beta-alanine to buffer acids during high rep sets and creatine for explosive lifts, while fueling workouts with carbohydrates. An endurance athlete needs to prioritize aerobic capacity through long runs or rides, consume carbohydrates during long events, and maintain hydration with electrolytes. Tailoring my training and supplementation to my specific goals means I'm not wasting time or money. To wrap up, let's distill the key takeaways from this energy systems overview. Here are the big points to remember. ATP powers every movement, and because it's used up quickly, my body relies on 3 overlapping systems to resupply it. The ATP PC system provides instant power. The glycolytic system acts as a backup generator for high-intensity efforts lasting up to a minute, and the oxidative system supplies sustained energy for longer activities. Training each system requires specific rep ranges and rest intervals, while fueling them involves targeted supplements: creatine for power, beta-alanine to buffer acids, and carbohydrates and electrolytes for endurance. When I understand these systems, I can make smarter decisions about how I train and what I put into my body. Lastly, I'll leave you with a call to action. Understanding my energy systems isn't just trivia, it's a roadmap to smarter training and better results. When I know how my body produces energy, I can choose the right workouts, rest periods, and supplements to match my goals. Whether you're a powerlifter chasing a new 1-rep max, a CrossFitter pushing through a Metcon, or a runner training for a marathon, tailoring your approach to your primary energy systems can make you more efficient and resilient. If you learn something new, let me know your go-to training style, share this with someone who needs a science boost, and keep experimenting with what works best for you. Now let's take this knowledge and put it into action.